Good morning. A decade from now, we may look back and view this past year as a watershed with respect to the issue of consumer data privacy. A year ago this month, news of the massive Equifax data breach made the headlines. Shortly thereafter, we brought the company's then current and former CEOs before the committee for a public accounting. Then in April, the Commerce Committee and Judiciary Committees held a joint hearing with Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg after revelations that political intelligence firm Cambridge Analytica had acquired access to the personal data of millions of unwitting Facebook users. In May, the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, known as GDPR, took effect, with many privacy-related mandates and severe penalties for violators. In June, the Consumer Protection Subcommittee held a hearing entitled Cambridge Analytica and Other Facebook Partners, Examining Data Privacy Risks, where Alexander Kogan, the Cambridge University academic at the center of the Cambridge Analytica controversy, testified. On June 28th, the California Consumer Privacy Act was signed into law. Like GDPR, the new California law, which will take effect on January 1st, 2020, contains many privacy mandates and severe penalties for violators. These developments have all combined to put the issue of consumer data privacy squarely on Congress's doorstep. The question is no longer whether we need a federal law to protect consumers' privacy. The question is what shape will that law take? To examine the impact of all of these developments, we're pleased to be joined today by representatives of some of the leading technology companies and Internet service providers in America. There's often a temptation to lump industry leaders like these together, as if they were all the same. But as we'll hear today, they actually have very different approaches to the collection, use, and protection of consumer data. I expect the witnesses to offer candid testimony about how their companies seek to address privacy concerns about their products and services and how new privacy requirements impact them. I want to hear how they are complying or planning to comply with GDPR and the California Consumer Privacy Act, the advantages and disadvantages of both laws from their perspectives, and the steps they believe the federal government should take to help protect consumer privacy. I hasten to add that this will not be the only hearing on consumer data privacy we will hold. Some have expressed angst that we have an industry-only panel here today. Let me reassure anyone who thinks we're going to be rushing through legislation without the benefit of alternative views that things don't work that way here. Early next month, we intend to convene a second hearing that will include privacy advocates as well as other key stakeholders. Alistair McTaggart, the California privacy activist, and Andrea Jelinek, the head of GDPR enforcement for the European Union, have agreed to attend. It's also important to remember that while we have not enacted a comprehensive national data privacy law, concern about privacy is not a new issue for Congress. Over the past 20 years, Congress has enacted laws on privacy affecting particular segments of the population and sectors of the nation's economy, such as the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, the Health Insurance Portability Act, and the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. But now we've arrived at a moment where I believe there is a strong desire by both Republicans and Democrats and by both industry and public interest groups to work in good faith to reach a consensus on a national consumer data privacy law that will help consumers, promote innovation, reward organizations with little to hide, and force shady practitioners to clean up their act. While this hearing grows out of recent concerns about consumer privacy, it's not intended to be a gotcha hearing. Instead, it represents the beginning of an effort to inform our development of a federal privacy law that enjoys strong bipartisan support. Politics is always about timing, and I believe now is the time to begin action on this important issue. I look forward to working with colleagues on both sides of the aisle in the coming months. And with that, I'll recognize the ranking member, Senator Nelson, for his opening statement. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as you noted, this is not the first hearing on the privacy issue. We've had many hearings because consumers have been hit by the misuse of their personal information and by data breaches all over the place. And consumers are worried. Do they have any privacy anymore? We have a number of witnesses here that will hopefully provide the committee with valuable insight into how their companies, your companies, safeguard your customers' private information. So let's get on with the hearing.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Very succinct. I like that. Well, we do have a big panel today, and we look forward to hearing from them and having members of the panel have the opportunity to ask questions and interact. So we will get started. And with us today, we have Mr. Len Calley, who's Senior Vice President for Global Public Policy at AT&T, Mr. Andrew DeVore, who's the Vice President and Associate General Counsel at Amazon.com, Inc., Mr. Keith Enright, who's the Chief Privacy Officer at Google, Mr. Damian Kieran, who is the Global Data Protection Officer and Associate Legal Director at Twitter, Inc., Mr. Guy Bud Tribble, the Vice President for Software Technology at Apple, Inc., and Ms. Rachel Welch, who is the Senior Vice President for Policy and External Affairs at Charter Communications, Inc. So we welcome you all here, appreciate your willingness to join us today, and obviously look forward to hearing from you. We'll ask you, if you can, keep your oral remarks to 5 minutes or thereabouts, and your entire statements will be included as a part of the permanent record. But we'll start on my left and your right with you, Mr. Calley. So nice to have you here. Please proceed.